One thing about the love of God, it will meet you in any situation at any time. And that's why I am so thankful for what's happening at Youth for Christ in Tacoma. There are people who are putting their arms around the shoulders of teen parents, and I believe one of them is with us this morning on Spirit 105.3. Hi.
Hi, this is Bebhinn from Youth for Christ.
Bebhinn, it is so nice to meet you on the phone. Thank you for the amazing work you're doing.
Oh, my pleasure.
I know every day you are meeting teen parents in Tacoma right where they are. What does that look like?
I get to help them find resources and then walk with them in their daily lives. And sometimes that's one-on-one, and that's connecting them in a group of teenagers in the same life circumstances, so other parenting teens, which is really beautiful.
I can't even imagine how beautiful. I know I was a young mom, but I was married. I had the security of a husband. I can't imagine how frightening it must be to have all of these changes going on inside of you and to not feel supported. What does the support you're offering mean to these precious girls?
Beyond the resources, I think that personal connection, sometimes the teenagers that I work with, they just want maybe like a big sister or someone to say, you're doing a really good job. When those things come up that are like desperate needs, like I need formula, I need diapers, I can access the resources that I'm connected to, but also I have a beautiful network of friends. I'll put something out on my personal Facebook and say, hey, does anyone have this? I have friends that have sent strollers from different states, and it's a way to show the young people that I work with that they're not alone and that they're cared for. That care, yes, comes from people, but they are loved by the Lord. Oh. And that's why these things are happening. And I really impress that every time, that you're not forgotten in your time of need and the Lord sees you. And I think that's the biggest thing.
It's got to be so rewarding. Do you see these young parents turning to God as a result of feeling His love?
I do. Sometimes it's a slow progression, and I never want the work that I do to feel transactional. Like, hey, you can have diapers if you memorize a Bible verse. It's not like that at all. It's about showing that the gospel is active and Jesus' love is active. Sometimes I will be surprised when I haven't even talked much with a particular mom, and they'll say, hey, I've been wanting to go to church with you. I'm like, absolutely. Wow. And I'm like, I will never say no to that. I'll come pick you up.
That's awesome.
I do have moms that have come to church and gotten baptized, and it's so sweet. I'll hear her say to another mom, like, so do you go to church? Do you have church? And she'll say, well, she could probably come to church with us. I'm like, of course,
Wow. I mean, this is so inspiring to hear. I'm so happy this is going on. What inspires you to do this kind of work?
One, I think I was just meant to do it. I haven't always been in, I guess you would call this vocational ministry, but I've worked with babies in church, kids' church in the nursery, and then older kids. Then I moved up to working with youth. And so this is kind of just like working with youth and babies together. So it's the perfect mesh.
It really is.
But, I met the Lord as a young teenager. I always had people in my life that walked with me as mentors and kind of served in that position. I didn't grow up in a Christian home, so I didn't have a lot of guidance myself, and I needed those people, and they really, really changed the trajectory of my life. And of course, that was the Lord putting those people there. And I think all of us that work for Youth for Christ, we have this idea of wanting to be the people that we needed in our lives when we were young. I know that was my inspiration, and I've heard that from others. So I think it's a very common denominator that we want to be a positive catalyst in the lives of young people. I just believe it's a calling from the Lord and where my gift sets lie. So that's definitely why.
I could not love your answer more. That's so true. Be the person you needed when you were young. So you talk about becoming a believer when you were very young. When was that moment for you, the one where you said yes to Jesus?
So it's actually really incredible. I had this idea of the Lord. I'd gone to church here and there with like neighbors, or I think I went with my grandma one time. But it was a very formal type church type thing.
Yeah.
But I would ask my mom questions and I'm like, I'm not sure this is the one for me, but so I had lots of questions as like a 9, 10-year-old. There was something in me that wanted God, but I didn't really have any way to learn more or find out. But I was about 12 or 13 when I met a friend at school that took me to church with her. Everyone was so nice, and I just felt like really loved and safe. And then at a summer camp, which is why summer camp is so important,
Yes.
I heard the gospel for the first time. The gospel took hold in my heart, and I believed, but I was also really sad. I said, how can I be 13 and I've never heard this before?
Oh.
And so I felt like it was a secret that was kept from me. So I was very like, yes, like I know this is truth and Jesus loves me and he died for me. But I just was like, how could I be 13 and I've never heard? And so I would say I argued my way through my salvation, but,
Wow.
but I was 13 and I never looked back. And so when I get discouraged in ministry, working with especially in my former youth ministry, like seeing kids that commit to the Lord and then kind of wander away and you think, does that ever take hold? And the Lord reminds me well, it did with you. So
Wow. He uses every scrap. I always like to say, Bebhinn, that with God, there are no leftovers. He uses it all.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I can imagine with these teen moms that there is shame, that they come in the door, they walk in the room carrying that on their backs. How do you lift that off their shoulders as a mentor?
I think it's really repetition of we need to hear affirmations of who we are. And we're not there to judge, but
Right.
At Youth for Christ, we're reminded it's not our opinion, but what does the word say? And, if the word says that you're loved and approved, that has power. But if I say that, you're doing an amazing job and I'm so proud of you, which I am, I tell the moms all the time, you guys are like superheroes. You're 16, 17, you're going to school and you're taking care of a baby at night. You have to coordinate how to get things done. And, that's such a hard job. I just get to go home and go to sleep. And, I don't have to worry about someone else's life 24/7. It's a really, really hard job. And I tell them all the time how proud I am of them. So, and it's not like fluff. It's the truth, the honest truth that they're doing such an amazing job. And, the Lord is proud of them. And yes, they're moms, but they're daughters of the Lord. And the dads, I have some dads also in my ministry. I have moms and dads together, and then I have moms, and then I have just a few dads where I just know the dad. I don't even know the mom, and that's pretty unique. So just encouraging them and the strength of what they're doing. And yeah.
Wow, you're literally speaking life over these kids. That's your job. How do you specifically minister to the dads who come to you? I find that fascinating.
Well, so it's a little bit more removed with the dads. My boss, he will mentor the dads one-on-one, but I will see them more in a setting like school. I'll meet with them there, but with the moms, I spend a lot of time going to coffee together or taking walks. I'll say, well, what do you want to do? And they're like, anything. I just want to get out of the house. And they just want time together. It's almost like counseling session. They get to talk and cry and, talk about what's going on in life. And literally 2 minutes before this call, I was texting with a mom about a job opening that I know and, and how she's feeling, things like that. It's kind of like an ongoing thing. It's really just mentoring and ongoing talking about life. And I have moms that, I've met and they'll say, well, can we still meet when I graduate? And I'm like, of course, in the ages, typically it's supposed to go until about 22-ish, but I tell them, you're not going to need me the same when you are 22, 23 as you do right now when they're 18 years old. And I tell them that Youth for Christ, we value lifelong relationships and we want to see them in lifelong relationships with Christ. But we are not going to say, well, now you're 23, bye-bye,
Right.
we have other kids to focus on. So I volunteered for Youth for Christ for a long time before I ever worked there. I've only been there for a little under 3 years, but I volunteered, 15 years ago. And there's a girl that that I think she was 13 when I met her, but she was very mature in a lot of ways. And this was what I was like when I was young, too. Like, I always talked to adults versus kids.
Me too.
So at church, she would just always talk to me and sit with me. And so but she always needed a ride home. So I would give her rides home, but then we would end up talking in the car for like an hour. And she had kind of a rough life, but she was in the ministries of Youth for Christ as well. And I went to her wedding.
Wow.
And she is doing amazing. I think she's 30 now, and she lives in another state and has 3 kids. And she still texts me every once in a while. But of course, I see her on social media and stuff. But I'm like, she doesn't need me like she did when she was 13, but we are still in touch. And it's not going to be the same way with everyone, but, that's just a beautiful example of how we desire to do things.
It certainly is. Bebhinn Horrigan, Parent Life Coordinator with Youth for Christ. Thank you for spending time with me today. It's been truly an honor. I think you're a superhero too. Thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you so much.
God bless you.
Right, you too.